Church urges eminent people to rise, defend Nigerian child. We won't negotiate with bandits and kidnappers. Coming from El Rufai. And the story can be found on pages 9 and 5. Beside the picture, pressure on food prices spikes inflation to 17.3%. Pressure on food prices spikes inflation to 17.3%. The story is on page 19. On page 4, concerns over AstraZeneca vaccine disrupt vaccination campaigns. We move to the picture on Vanguard newspaper. STAG WTO DG visits CBN governor. The Director General, World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and a CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, during her working visit to the Central Bank of Nigeria in Abuja. This happened yesterday. See story on page 8. Another picture here, Zenith Bank AGM has the picture of the chairman, Zenith Bank PLC, Mr. Jim Ovia Center, flanked by the group managing director and CEO, Mr. Ebenezer Onyagu, left, and the deputy managing director, Dame Dr. Adora Umioji, right, at the 30th annual general meeting of the bank held at the Civic Center, Victoria Island, Lagos. This happened yesterday. And now above the masthead on page 40, affair for Vanguard, national minimum wage, impracticable and unfair. Commendation for National Assembly 2. The story is on page 40. And on page 12, fresh oil spill wreaks havoc in Delta communities. Zenith Bank shareholders okay 94.2 billion naira dividend. The story is on page 5. And on page 10, court remands Wakili, orders for murder, kidnapping and conspiracy. And to the last story on Vanguard newspaper, bank customers to pay 6.98 naira for USSD transactions. This is coming from CBN and NCC. The story can be found on page 19. We move to New Telegraph newspaper. I'll take it above the masthead. DMO, 32.91 trillion naira debt, stuck within 40% limit threshold. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 3. On page 4, analysts, upward trend to persist as inflation hits 17.3%. Analysts, upward trend to persist as inflation hits 17.3%. The story on page 4. Below the masthead on page 4, NEITI moves to recover 69 billion naira, $5.31 billion from oil firms. Page 3 from CBN, bank customers to pay 6.98 naira per USSD transaction. And on that same page, WTO, Nigeria's ban on dairy product import rattles EU. Nigeria's ban on dairy product import rattles EU. And coming from Afenifere, Fasaranti steps down, names Adebanjo as successor, as on page 27. I have constitutional power to extend IGP's tenure, Buhari tells court, as the lead story on New Telegraph. And the kicker, why hearing of suit against Adamu was told. See page 2 for details. And the picture is that of Group Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Ebenezer, the Chairman, Zenith Bank PLC, Mr. Ovia, and Deputy Managing Director, Dem Adora, during the 30th Annual General Meeting of the bank in Lagos. This happened on Tuesday. Below the picture, EFCC gives June deadline for bankers to declare assets, says cybercrime chasing investors away from Nigeria. The story is on page 4. And to the last story here, on page 8, household products raise risks of premature birth. This is a study and is on page 8. We'll move now to Nigerian Tribune newspaper. I'll take it from the top, above the masthead. Federal government, states, FCT owed 32.915 trillion naira as of December 2020, coming from DMO. Page 29. EFCC to demand bankers' assets declaration form from June 1st. Below the masthead, WTO to mediate as EU complains about Nigeria. See story on page 6. On page 7, again, FIRS claims authority over stamp duties collection. Bank customers to pay 6.98 naira per USSD transaction. The story is on page 6. The lead story, Nigeria's inflation rate hit 17.33%, highest in 4 years. The kicker, prices of food items highest in Kogi, Ondo, and Ebonyi. The story can be found on page 6. Beside the picture, 5 kidnapped on Ijebu-Ode, Ibadan Road. The kicker, police rescue bank staff, palm wine tapper. Search continues for 3 others. The story is on page 27. And on page 26, families use traditionalists for hijacking monarch's corpse in Ogun. The story is on page 26. And on page 2, Wakili, 2 sons docked, remanded in prison. 3 dead as over 230 people get sick in Kano. 4 arrested over fake Jews. The story can be found on page 26. Adebanjo emerges acting Afenifere leader as Fasoroti steps down. The kicker, Afenifere remains unyielding on restructuring good governance, he says. The story is on page 30. And on page 2, hostile communities, vast borders line impending efforts against armed proliferation. Hostile communities, vast borderline impeding efforts against armed proliferation, coming from customs. The kicker, security experts call vigilance, intelligence gathering ahead 2023 elections. The story can be found on page 2. On page 28, Constitution empowers me to extend IGP's tenure, coming from Buhari. And to the last story on Nigerian Tribune on page 8, NBS report exposes APC's lies about employment job creation, coming from PDP. And the story is on page 8. Remember, you can join us through phone calls and our social media and contribute from the stories we've read. We have the story of the extension of the IGP, the inflation rate rise, and customers to pay 6.8 naira for their duty charges. We continue now with the leadership newspaper. I'll take it below the masthead. Customers to pay 6.98 naira per transaction for USSD services. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 4. On that same page, safety of core members our priority, coming from NYSC. And on page 34, Zenith Bank rewards shareholders with 94.19 billion naira dividend. That's on page 10. PDP to take stand on zoning as committee submits report. The lead story, 17.33% inflation. Experts blame insecurity, rising energy costs. The kicker, urge government to map out policies to tackle insecurity, supply chain challenges. Federal government services debt with 351 billion naira. The story is on page 4. And now to the picture from right to left is that of President Muhammadu Buhari, his outgoing Niger Republic counterpart, Sokoto State Governor, Yobe State Governor, Katsina State Governor, Zamfara State Governor, and Jigawa State Governor during President Yusufu's visit to the presidential villa. This happened yesterday. And the last story on leadership newspaper on page 7. Undiagnosed disease. Kano residents want Kunu sellers prosecuted. State government confirms 3 dead. 284 infections. The story starts from the front page. It continues on page 7. Moving now to Blueprint newspaper. I'll take it beside the masthead. Zenith Bank rewards shareholders with 94.19 billion naira dividend payout. The story is on page 5. And on page 23, USSD, banks, NCC, MNOs agree to charge customers 6.98 naira. Below the masthead, minimum wage bill. We are ready for nationwide protest, Labour tells Gbajabiamila. The kicker, Muslim media group bags workers. We won't hurt you, Gbajabiamila assures workers. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 6. Now page 15. El-Rufai vows not to negotiate with kidnappers of 39 students. The lead story, strange disease killed 3 in Kano, 284 others hospitalized. The kickers, in-death case drank water near cemetery, coming from the state government. 3 arrested. 59 million naira flavored drink powder, others confiscated. Greedy businessmen behind our woes. This is coming from the residents, and the story can be found on page 6. Below the picture, Benue Deputy Governor doubts safety, efficacy of COVID-19 vaccine. Says only those interested will be vaccinated. No cause for alarm, federal government assures. The story can be found on pages 16 and 6. All right, right about now we pause to go for a short break. When we return, we'll look at more stories from other newspapers. Please stay tuned.
Every person who is charged with a criminal offense is entitled to defend himself in person or by a legal practitioner of his own choice.
Remember that an individual is entitled to remain silent.
In Nigeria is entitled to maintain a private life.
You are approaching a military checkpoint or a police checkpoint without knowing that it is against or it offends them and subject you to a frog jump. That is wrong.
Thank you for staying tuned. If you're just joining us, it is the newspaper headlines. Please remember to share our links and follow us on our various social media platforms. On YouTube, it's youtube.com/ACNN-TV. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/ACNN-TV. On Instagram and Twitter, at ACNN, at ACNN-TV. And our website is www.acnntv.com. We continue with the Nigerian Pilot newspaper, and I'll take it from the lead story. It's very catchy. Buhari confesses. Now to the kickers. Says activities of bandits, kidnappers threatening his reform agenda. That it's difficult to achieve meaningful development amid security challenges. Regrets that criminals have infiltrated mining industry using proceeds for arms. Reiterate his charge to service chiefs to flush out criminals in few weeks. The story can be found on page 8. Below the picture, Buhari Malami supports IGP Adamu remaining in office till 2023 or 2024. The story is on page 5. Now, the bottom strip stories. We will not negotiate with bandits and kidnappers, coming from El-Rufai. The story is on page 6. Page 5. EFCC orders bank workers to declare assets. Set June 1st deadline. Boko Haram attacks Yobe community. Burns military base. The story is on page 8. Page 12. Coastal Defense Force writes Buhari on sea terrorism. Pa Fasoranti steps down as national leader of Afenifere. The story is on page 8. CBN introduces new charges for USSD services. See details on page 8. Now, above the lead story, inflation rate hits 17.33%, worst in 4 years. See details on page 5. On page 13, coming from INEC, National Assembly must expedite action on Electoral Act Amendment Bill. That is the last story on Nigerian Pilot newspaper. We move to People's Daily newspaper. I'll take it below the masthead. Financial crimes. Bankers must declare assets before June. EFCC boss insists. The details on page 18. The lead story. 3 die. 284 infected as strange disease hits Kano. The details on page 8. And the picture from left to right is that of the Permanent Secretary, Industry and Trade and Investment, the Deputy Governor of Financial System Stability, CBN, Director General World Trade Organization, CBN Governor, Chair of WTO Committee on Trade and Environment during a working visit to the Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021. Below the picture, don't withdraw USSD services to Nigerians. Reps warn telecom operators. The story can be found on page 3. The bottom strip story is on page 18. Drop National Minimum Wage Bill. NLC. TUC urge reps. Page 5. Buhari receives highest Niger Republic award. Diversification. Senate considers bill to shore up forex earnings from share export. And the last story on People's Daily newspaper. U.S. advocates more women inclusion in leadership. The story can be found on page 4. Moving on to Business Day newspaper, I'll take it from the lead story. Nigerians more miserable than African peers. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 30. Renewables offer local oil firms parts to investment. Story starts from the front page and continues on page 30. An inside story. Zenith Bank pays 94.19 billion naira as dividend. See story on page 4. On pages 22 and 23, third of 4-part series on notable court cases of 2020 and their implication. Courtesy Olaniun Ajayi. That ends it from the front pages this morning. We move to sport from the Vanguard newspaper on page 46 and the back page. I'll start with that on page 46. Ahead of £200 million fight with Fury, Mayweather to coach Joshua. Another story, ahead of Atletico Madrid clash, Tuchel admits worry over Chelsea. Kamaru Usman battles Masvidal April 24th in UFC. Infantino, Asia Confederation, Japan FA felicitate with Pinnick. Ibrahimovic comes out of international retirement for Sweden. Man United, Arsenal, Tottenham gear up for Europa League. NLO, that's the Nationwide League 1. 4-star Otasolo maintains unbeaten run. 4-star Otasolo maintains unbeaten run. Wengan wants World Cup played every 2 years. And holders Al Ali grab vital win. To the last story on page 46. Aribo named Nigeria's most successful player between MACH. We move to the back page of Vanguard Sports. AFCON qualifiers. COVID-19 restrictions deal major blow to Benin Squirrels. The kicker. Coach fails to pick squad against Eagles. See inside page for more details. And CAF Confederation Cup. Pirates are slippery. Aimba coach warns players. That wraps it up on the update here. We give you today's fixtures on Champions League. Bayern Munich versus Lazio. That comes up 9 p.m. Chelsea versus Atletico Madrid. 9 p.m. La Liga, Sevilla versus Elche, 7 p.m. And Serie A, Torino versus Sassuolo, 3 p.m. Then we have CAF Confederation Cup, NPF comes up by 4 p.m. And we also have the results from CAF Champions League. That wraps it up here. And with the sports update, we've come to the end of today's edition of Newspaper Headlines. Many thanks for joining us. Please do join us for a fresh edition on Friday. Psalms chapter 138 verse 7 says, Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hands against the anger of my foes. With your right hand you saved me. May the hand of the Lord continue to protect and preserve us in this end time. Remain blessed, and bye for now.
Joshua Generation International Youth Conference, an unusual experience, an unusual gathering of the youths, an unusual experience with the Lord, an unusual strategic discipleship movement towards the youths, an unusual and holistic development of our youths to make them ready to occupy the 7 mountains of influence of the world for the Lord and for the expansion of the kingdom of God. The primate of the Church of Nigeria, His Grace Most Reverend Henry Ndokoba, didn't leave anybody